Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Violate Written Safety Procedures So We Don't Lose $24 Million. Nope. This happened about 15 years ago at a large manufacturing plant, at which I was one of 120 industrial electricians, and this happened in the department in which I was primarily responsible. These jobs pay upwards of $30 per hour, and I was making $34 per hour at the time. This was my career for decades before I retired last year. I now get a pension from them and fully paid health care. This wasn't just a run-of-the-mill job. This was something to take very, very seriously. Our safety administrator retired, so a new guy started and decided to audit all of the lockout-tagout procedures (LOTO) everywhere in the facility. This place employed 4,000 people and was over 1.5 million square feet, so it was a massive undertaking. Many of the machines in my department were large, multi-station transfer machines, where the part goes into several drilling, milling, tapping, boring operations, and are transferred to the next station in turn between operations. Basically, the operator loads a raw part into it, and once it comes back around to him/her, it's finished. The cycle time for this machine was about 1 minute and was a key part in expensive final products, costing upwards of $50,000 each. It was made clear to me that the company lost $50,000 for every minute the machine was idle, as a way of instilling urgency, as if I needed it. As I said, these machines had multiple stations that each had its own specialized operation to accomplish, all automatically. This, of course, involved many switches, buttons, computers, motors, encoders, drives, all of which are used in industrial automation and sequencing. Usually, when an electrical part broke on a particular station, I would shut down the electrical power for that one station to perform my repairs and replacements. All was good, and I could usually perform just about any repair within 15 minutes or less. The management people usually didn't even know anything unusual happened, as the operators were on piecework and would often skip a break to make up the shortfall. Until the new LOTO procedures were released for those machines. The new procedure required anyone performing repairs to LOTO every station, for every kind of energy potential. This includes electrical, pneumatic, hydraulic, and gravity. Since this was a union facility, this required the services of an electrician, a plumber, a mechanic, and a millwright. It also required something like 38 individual locks to be applied by the aforementioned skilled tradespersons. It also required about 4 to 8 hours of work to complete this task. Keep in mind these were huge machines that would take up an area the size of a gymnasium, and cost tens of millions of dollars to buy. When I saw the new LOTO procedure, I grabbed my boss and the production supervisor and showed it to them and explained, in detail, why this was ridiculous, unnecessary, and unworkable. My boss got the safety administrator, and we all had a conference, and I was told, basically, that's the way it is. The very next day a type of switch called a proximity switch failed on one of these machines. Normally, a 5 to 10 minute repair. Cue malicious compliance. I dutifully informed the production supervisor that he lost his machine for the rest of the shift and half the following shift. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Dude, I'm dead serious." I got my boss, told him I needed 38 LOTO locks, a plumber, a mechanic, and a millwright. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. Remember the conversation we had yesterday? It just got real. Show me why you need 38 locks. Okay, and I brought him to the machine, pulled the 10-page illustrated, notated, laminated LOTO procedure off the machine, and counted where each and every lock needs to go. 38. And I need the other tradesmen here as well. I figure the machine will be rendered safe by the end of the shift. Matt can do the repair, and another 4 hours to remove the locks and set the machine up to be ready to run by their lunchtime. Also, keep in mind that there will be cribbing to make the gravity potential safe, and most locks need a special kind of hardware to apply to valves and other devices to be able to function correctly. Just fix it the way you usually fix it, my boss told me. Put it in writing, I said. Just fix the damn thing, was his unhelpful reply. I think you need to give it to me in writing, or you need to get my union rep here. Those are your two choices. I'm not gonna get fired over this." About this time, several men in suits and ties showed up to find out what the problem is, called into action by the production supervisor I previously mentioned. He and I had a great working relationship, and he knew what was going down, so he started making phone calls when I let him know his machine was broke. To make a long story short, an hour-long meeting was held which included my union rep, after which I was provided written permission to make the repairs as I always had. The new safety administrator had been properly scolded and learned a lesson. Management learned to just let Wynut do his job. And the machine was running 10 minutes after I received the paper. That was a loss of $3.5 million according to their math. It would have been $24 million lost if I had to follow their procedures to the letter. All new procedures were put in place with much input from my colleagues and me. This was a test case for how the other 500 skilled tradespeople were going to be proceeding with the new safety guy, as they had also been provided with new, ridiculous LOTO procedures. It just turned out that I was the first to have to implement them. The next one is titled, "Being Late Counts as an Absence?" Okay then. Back in the early 2000s I worked at a shitty call center that had a pretty straightforward attendance policy. If you called in sick for the day, you got an attendance point. If you were 15 or more minutes late for your shift, you got a half point. Additionally, absences over consecutive days with a doctor's note were worth 1 point. If you had more than 6 points in a 6-month period, they let you go. A few years later, we get a notification that the policy had now changed. If you had more than 3 points in the calendar year, you were terminated. Also, there were no more half points for being late. If you didn't sign into your phone within 5 minutes of your scheduled shift, it was considered a full attendance point, even if you worked the full shift. The result, people would show up to work late because of traffic, or whatever, realize they were going to be penalized the same as if they hadn't shown up, and would then call the sick line and leave. Enter malicious compliance time. I had a coworker who was 15 minutes late because of a traffic accident on his commute. His supervisor told him he couldn't grant an exception, while tut-tutting about not being better prepared for something that was beyond his control. So the coworker, without breaking eye contact with the supervisor, called the sick line from this desk phone saying he was going to be absent for the day, and then left. I had a hard time not laughing while I watched the whole thing. Pretty soon turnover, which was already high for a call center, went through the roof, to the point where they were having difficulty keeping minimum staffing needed for their contracts. 6 months later, they rolled the policy back without explanation. The next one is titled, "Okay, I'll carry items that don't sell." When I was in my early 20s I was a seafood department manager for a chain grocery store. I was good at my job, motivated to do my best for the company, etc. At my first store I increased the sales and gross profit percentage within a few months. After a year I got transferred to a larger store that had tons of issues with instructions to turn things around. Within 3 months we were leading the district. After a year there I get transferred yet again with the same instructions, which is where the fun begins. This store was the smallest in the district and was barely making money. My first store averaged $12K in sales per week, my second $20K in sales. The third counter was only doing $3 to $4K in sales per week and was losing money. 5 different department managers had failed in trying to fix things. My first week was spent getting things organized, going over sales reports, and getting to know the type of shoppers the store had. The problem was easy to see. The company was trying to sell things that people didn't want to buy. I quickly changed what was being ordered. Since it was such a slow store, there was a lot of downtime during the day. I was ordering whole fish and marketing everything in multiple ways, whole but pre-cleaned, steaks, fillets, even the heads and bones, cutting everything myself. I also switched from fresh to frozen for high-dollar items that didn't sell well. I was keeping very detailed records in Excel spreadsheets. I was bringing in a lot less overall product, but had a much better variety that our customers actually wanted. By the end of the 3rd month we were doing almost $6K in sales per week and my profit was again leading the district. It was something crazy like 50% when the target was 30%. More people were coming in the store, so total sales were increasing as well. The 4th month was just as good, even though it was during our slow time, midsummer. Enter the district manager and my supervisor. Both came in to visit after seeing the reports for my 3rd and 4th month. They had figured the 3rd month was a fluke, and when they got the 4th month they figured I must be playing with the numbers somehow. Their first reaction was, "Wow, the department looks amazing." As I showed them what had been happening and what I had done to fix it, you could see the supervisor getting more impressed while the DM was getting mad. I finally looked at the DM and asked what was wrong. He went on a 10-minute rant about needing to carry all of the things that didn't sell and asked why I didn't have fresh flounder. I replied that when we carried it at full price we would only sell about £2 per week, but would have to order 20 pounds. Things came in £10 increments and fresh fish had to be ordered twice a week to carry it. I explained that doing things like that on a regular basis was why the department had been losing money. I also explained that I had been told by the supervisor, who was there, to fix things any way I could. The supervisor denied saying that. I was told that I was to follow the plan the company had for the district at all times, and if I ever didn't have something on the sheet or had something that wasn't on the sheet I would face disciplinary action. I asked for the instructions in writing this time and received it in the form of a written, verbal warning for failure to follow instructions. Malicious Compliance Part 1. I was obviously upset, but I did what I was told. The next month was a nightmare. The store manager, district manager, and supervisor were constantly checking on me and trying to find things to write me up for. At the end of the month we had sales just over $3,000 per week with a 2% gross profit, and thousands of dollars of fish had been thrown away when they went bad. We also were getting customer complaints about not having the items they wanted. The DM and supervisor came back in and started chewing me out. I sat patiently until I was asked if I had anything to say. I pulled out my reports that showed that I had ordered everything I was supposed to and how much of that was being thrown away because my customers didn't want it or couldn't afford it. Things went back and forth, and I finally asked how 2 people who obviously knew nothing about marketing had reached the positions they had. Maybe a mistake, but I was young and hot-headed. This time I ended up with written warnings for insubordination and failure to follow instructions, and was told I was being demoted to clerk because I didn't know how to do my job. I challenged both through the union. Long story short, the insubordination was lowered to a verbal warning and the failure to follow instructions was completely removed, since I had written proof that I was doing exactly what I was told. I was given a full-time clerk position at a different store and kept my manager pay. I ended up staying for about 8 more years before being forced out after refusing multiple promotion offers. They wanted to eliminate the full-time spot to save money, but couldn't take away my full-time. That isn't the end of the story. Malicious Compliance Part 2. The way I had been treated pissed off a lot of people at a lot of stores in the area. A lot of the same people also got worried the company would do the same to them, which sparked 2 issues. The first was almost every seafood department started following the company plan 100%. People started getting jobs with competitors as well. Over the next 2 years, seafood profits went down company-wide, which affected all other sales, and a lot of talented people had jumped ship. The company ended up closing about 1/3 of their seafood counters. They switched to pre-packed product and closed 3 slow stores altogether in attempts to increase their gross profit, not sales or actual profit, just the percentage. They are still around, but they lost a lot of market share and still struggle to keep talented employees. I no longer work any form of retail and will never go back. The next one is titled, "You are not allowed to decide when to eat lunch." Got it, boss. This was some time ago, probably early 2000s, but this event is burned into my brain. I'm sure over the years the story has been embellished a bit, but the core of the story is told exactly as it happened. I've worked in K-12 education technology most of my 20+ years in my professional career. When I first started, I was the only technician for a small, medium school district, 2,500 or so students. During the time of this event, the Director of Special Education (SPED) was married to the superintendent. I reported to the business manager, who used to teach technology but was not a technical person. For the most part, one was left to do my work and was not overly micromanaged. So I got into a habit of taking my lunch whenever I felt like it or even not at all. If I didn't take lunch and there was no pressing work, I would just leave a little early at the end of the day. Of course, I made sure all the schools were out before I left. As time goes on, I got in trouble for leaving early. So I would take my lunch whenever time permitted. Sometimes it was when there was only an hour left from work, sometimes not. But I would chill at my desk and just screw off. The others in the office where my desk was reported me for screwing off every afternoon. When I tried to explain to the business manager that I was taking my lunch, she says something to effect of, "You can longer take your lunch whenever you want, your lunch is from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. I say, "No problem, message received." So starting that day, no matter what I was doing, at 12 o'clock I would stop what I was doing and take my lunch. If I was at my desk, I would screw off. If I was at a school site, I would go sit in my car. Fast forward a month or two later, at about 11:30 the director of SPED calls and says his computer is not working and I need to come fix it right away. I say sure thing, on my way. When I get to his office, he says please fix it and heads off to a meeting. So I start in on removing all spyware he has managed to collect. At this time all employees were local admins on their desktops. About 1/3 of the way through 12 o'clock hits. I stand up and walk out of his office and tell his secretary I'll be back in an hour. Out to my car I go, expecting a phone call any minute, and sure enough about 15 minutes in I get a phone call from the business manager. Here's about how the call goes. "BM, business manager, my boss, and me, BM, I hear you walked out of the SPED director's office without fixing his computer. ME, correct, it is my lunch time." "BM, what do you mean, you couldn't fix his computer first?" "Me, I could have, but you told me that I could not decide when my lunch break was, that I had to take lunch from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. "BM, wait, that's not what I meant." "Me, but that is what you said. If I stayed and worked on the computer and took my lunch at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I did not want to get in trouble for screwing off when I was supposed to be working." "BM, okay, I'll call you back." She calls back about 15 minutes later asking if I can please go back in and finish his computer, and from now on I can decide when the best time to take my lunch. And it was never talked about again. It was nice being able to go home early when I didn't my lunch again. The next one is titled, "Alter the inventory reports so I don't have explain things." Back in 2016 I took over as a lab manager. The previous guy running the lab as well as the boss were the golden children and could do no wrong. Later found out they were omitting all kinds of information on monthly reports to make the numbers look good. My first month I ran the reports and submitted the inventory report to admin. I found 85 items that were red tagged, failed diagnostic tests, non-operational, and admin calls me asking why it's so different from the previous month as there were only 5 assets on the previous report. I tell them I have no clue why that is and that I'm simply doing truth in reporting of our inventory. They tell me remove information and make it match to previous month. I explain that these are all the failed, broken assets on hand, but they tell me they don't want to explain to upper management about a change to 85 failed assets from 5. I run this through my boss and explain the truth in reporting. He says just do it. So, I deleted the data to match previous month's report and everyone is happy. I am submitting these altered reports for 5 months with no complaints. The higher-ups do an unannounced walk-through one day and decided to look at our master inventory. They see the list of red tag assets and ask why there are so many and that it doesn't match the reports they get. I explain that I simply submit the data my boss tells me to submit. They aren't happy with the answer. My boss gets his butt chewed out. Shit rolls downhill and I get yelled at which point I reminded him about what he wanted me to do. A week later they are asking for complete truth and reporting and want to see all red-tagged assets on the monthly report. Lucky me, I already knew what was going on with them and was easy to update the status. We quickly resolved all the issues, repairs and refurbishing, and I am recognized for running an amazing lab with an award from our inspectors. The last one is titled, "Your dress code should be more specific." One summer during college I worked at a telemarketing agency. This was back when telemarketing was a semi-respectable job. I sold lots of different products from long-distance phone plans to retirement annuities via a patriotic credit card company. Anyway, being a semi-respectable firm, our call center had a dress code. Nothing out of the ordinary really. Men had to wear button-up shirts with collars, a tie, dress pants, and dress shoes. No jeans, t-shirts, or sneakers. Women had more leeway. Pretty much the only restrictions were no open-toe shoes, and dresses had to be below the knee. Violating the dress code was punishable by being sent home for your shift. One day I had a laundry emergency. The clothes dryer had broken and all of my work shirts were still wet when I went to retrieve them. The only shirts I had left that were even close to dress code were shirts with a Nehru collar. That is to say, almost no collar. As such, you don't wear a tie with this type of shirt. I decided to roll the dice. I suited up and threw on a blazer to help camouflage my dress code violation. Once I get to work, I go straight to my cube and work my shift with no problems. This is great. I had just doubled my work wardrobe. So I would wear one of my Nehru shirts once a week or so. I didn't want to push my luck. During this same time, I had noticed some of the women blatantly violating the dress code. Way too short dresses, sweatpants, flip-flops, etc. No one ever called them out on it. I figured the dress code had been relaxed and I just didn't get the memo. I continued to follow the dress code with the exception of my occasional Nehru shirts. This went on for several weeks until one day my manager calls me into her office. I figure the jig is up. Sure enough, she has called me in to reprimand me for not wearing a tie. The HR manager is there as well. I tried to explain that you don't wear a tie with this type of shirt. The HR manager replied with, "That's a good point. That's 2 violations." I got a write-up but got to finish my shift since it was almost over anyway. Cue the malicious compliance. It was Friday, so I went home and stewed about the encounter. I hatched a plan. Saturday morning I went to the local thrift store and bought some of the ugliest ties and button-up collared shirts I could find. One particularly eye-scorching tie I found was knitted, bright orange with horizontal teal stripes. The shirts were mainly pastel colors, but I also found a few gems that included a pink, green, and yellow plaid, a red and neon green Hawaiian shirt, and a red, white, and blue vertical striped shirt. All button-up with collars. I paid less than $10 for 10 shirts and 15 ties. To be fair, most of the items were not too bad on their own. However, when I went back to work, I made no effort to color coordinate. The result was a mix-mash of clashing colors and patterns that should have come with a "warning may cause seizures" label. I went to work the full week without acknowledging my outlandish attire. Why would I? I was following the dress code to the letter. By the Wednesday of the following week, management had had enough. Again, I was called into the manager's office. Again, the HR manager was also there. But there was a new guy. Turns out he was an executive from Patriotic Credit Card Company. Manager starts with, "We've had some complaints about your attire." I looked confused. "It's a collared shirt," I replied as I patted my tie as if to make sure it was still there. "Oh, it's not that. Your look is just, well, it's jarring. I don't follow." I drug this out for about 2 minutes before HR lady had had enough and just full-faced screamed at me. "Don't think I don't know what you're trying to pull, you little idiot with your ugly clothes." Such language. And from an HR person. Executive guy was visibly taken aback. For my part, one just started crying. Huge crocodile tears. "You think my clothes are ugly?" At this point, everyone in the room is visibly uncomfortable as I continued to ugly cry in the office. Manager attempted to defuse the situation. "What we're trying to say is it's just unprofessional." I snapped up and screamed, "She didn't say unprofessional, she said ugly," as I jabbed my finger at her. I was loud enough that I'm sure they heard me in on the call floor. I calmed down after a minute. "What exactly is wrong with the way I'm dressed?" I asked, still sobbing. "Well, the colors," she started. I interrupted, "What colors am I not allowed to wear?" I caught an amused smirk from executive guy. She stammered. "Because there is no mention of prohibited colors in the dress code." I interrupted again. "I don't think this is working out. You're fired." I stood up, collected myself. You will be hearing from my attorney," I said as I left the room. My attorney being my cousin, but they didn't need to know that. So yeah, I got fired. But it was a win in my book. I made them tell me my clothes were ugly. Also, I found out afterwards that not only did the company lose the Patriotic Credit Card Company annuity account, the HR manager was fired, asked to resign, and my manager was sent back to corporate. I would like to think I was the cause of that. Thanks for listening.